Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 245 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. This is the last episode of 2023. And it's an important topic. The topic is when you hear someone say, "It's not my job." And we've all heard this before. It can be quite a frustrating statement, especially when one of our team members says it. So I want to dig into this and look at, okay, why might this be happening and what can I do about it? So let's get into the episode right now. So we've all heard this in one form or another in the workplace. It's not my job. And this phrase can be super frustrating for leaders to hear, but it usually doesn't appear without a good reason. So in this episode, I'm going to take a look at some of the common reasons for this statement, as well as some of the ways you might be able to improve the situation. Now, when you hear someone say this dreaded phrase, you might have a few common reactions. So the first one is you might assume the person saying it is not committed to the job, or you might believe that they are lazy. Another common thought is that the person is not a team player, in quotes, and that is they aren't helpful to you or their teammates. But this doesn't come out of nowhere. There is usually a very good reason for this phrase appearing. You just need to find out what it is. Now, I always start with this default when I'm leading people or working with a leader who is, and it is people don't intentionally do a bad job at work or come in with the intention of making everyone's life miserable. That's not to say it doesn't happen, but I find it's very rarely on purpose when I see this sort of behaviour or lack of commitment. Now, with that default in mind, we can try to tackle the situation constructively rather than dismiss the person's attitude as being a symptom of laziness or ill intent. And if you haven't checked out episode 149 yet, that has some steps to break negative behaviour patterns in your team as well. That might be a handy one to also look at. You can find links to all the episodes and everything else I mentioned in the show notes page, which for this episode will be thoughtfulleader.com/245. So let's look at why this phrase, "it's not my job," can be so damaging. Well, it's because it goes against teamwork and flexibility, in my view. Now, the workplace can be chaotic and busy. Many leaders are working in situations where there is too much to do with not enough resources to do it. Now, as a result, flexibility is key. With a happy, motivated team, you'll often see team members pitching in to help others when it's needed. And when we see the "it's not my job" mentality come out, this can be a sign that all is not well in the team. Instead of pitching in, people are refusing to help. Now, when your team has a degree of flexibility, greater resilience exists. If workloads increase, people spend additional effort to pick up the slack. Now, without this teamwork, gaps can appear, and certain people may become overwhelmed while others maintain their regular workloads. Now, this additional flexibility also helps with emergencies, where unexpected events occur that need to be taken care of. So, what do you think is behind this comment, the "it's not my job" comment? Now, remember our default position that people don't come to work to do a bad job or make your life difficult. Now, it's important to keep an open mind if you hear this or a similar phrase. So sure, we can blame the team member for saying it, but instead of this, let's look at some of the potential causes. Now, cause number one, in my experience, is that team members may feel undervalued. So, this could be undervalued or unappreciated, and it's number one on my list. If a team member doesn't feel like they're being appropriately recognised or appreciated for their efforts, they may be thinking, "why would I bother?" Now, over time, this can build into a smouldering resentment, which could have them being less than helpful to your team. Now, this is even more likely if they feel they've been putting in extra effort that has not been recognised. If they believe they have been going over and above for you, then they'll be expecting some sort of recognition. Now, this recognition may also be compared with others in the team. If a team member feels they have been working just as hard as others who have been recognised in some way, you may have an "it's not my job" coming. Now, cause number two I notice is a perceived lack of fairness. Sometimes I see an "it's not my job" occur because of this lack of fairness coming up. Now, this often shows up when a team member believes they are doing more work than other colleagues or shouldering more responsibility for little reward. The solution in their mind is to pull back on their effort to equalize the situation. And unfortunately, nobody benefits from this, and once again, we can see a growing resentment if the situation continues. Another potential source of the "it's not my job" is a lack of motivation. Now, a lack of motivation can have many causes, but in the case of "it's not my job," I feel the cause is often due to problematic hygiene factors, which can develop into resentment or apathy. So when it comes to motivation, hygiene factors are those things that reduce motivation and job satisfaction if they aren't present or adequate. However, the catch with these types of factors is that just having more of them does not result in higher motivation. They only really get us to a baseline level of motivation rather than one which will see us going over and above. So some examples of what they call hygiene factors include salary or a poor work environment. Now, people who believe they are underpaid are unlikely to spend extra effort to help others. Instead, you might find them using the phrase "it's not my job" until they feel they are compensated fairly. Now, other than these hygiene factors, there are those factors that will push people to higher levels of performance by adding them to the work environment. So, for example, greater autonomy, a sense of purpose, meaningful work, and developing new skills are several factors that often result in greater levels of motivation as long as we satisfy the hygiene factors first. And by the way, the word hygiene in this hygiene factors is from motivation theory. It's not just something I made up. So if you haven't heard of that, that's where I'm pulling that word from. Now, without any of these factors in place, you might find that people will show up for work but fail to put in extra effort or show the willingness to pitch in and help others. And I've got a bunch of different articles on motivation and podcasts as well, which I'll link to in the show notes page. I won't reference them all now, but there's a lot of different resources I've already talked about, which I'll link to, which you might find useful when it comes to motivation. Now, the fourth cause I notice of the "it's not my job" is self-preservation. We've all heard many stories of burnout, stress, and fatigue. A fairly recent phenomenon resulting from this is the rise of what people call quiet quitting, and this is essentially people putting in just enough effort to do the job, but holding back from going over and above. In other words, they'll go home when the work is done, but they won't do any more than is required. Now, I believe this has a lot to do with self-preservation. That is, people understand their limits and realize when work demands are becoming too high. They pull back in an effort to safeguard their own well-being and to cultivate a sense of work-life balance. Now, if overwhelming workloads are the norm in your team, you could find some team members pulling back from additional work by playing the "it's not my job" card. And really, who can blame them if they're stuck in an overwhelming work situation? And the last cause I think is at play for this "it's not my job" statement is a potential lack of skills. Now, if someone is refusing to do a task, it could be down to a lack of confidence to actually do the work. It may show up as an unhelpful behaviour, but is it actually because the person feels they might fail? Instead of admitting they don't know, some team members may feel ashamed that they can't perform the work you need them to. And hiding the problem is regarded as better than admitting fault in their eyes. Now, the question to ask yourself is your team environment one where people feel they can admit mistakes, or one where they need to be covered up? So let's move on to the practical bit, which is, okay, what can you do about this "it's not my job" phenomena? Well, based on the causes above, you can probably sense a few of the potential solutions, which are pretty obvious. When there's a lack of motivation, you increase the motivational factors for the team member. Where there's a lack of fairness, you try to address the imbalance. For a lack of skills, you can help them to learn. What isn't obvious is the actual cause of the problem. So how do you find out? Well, usually it starts with a conversation. And to find out more about the problem, you need to speak to your people to work out what's really going on. The starting point is the preparation for that conversation. So to prepare for a conversation like this, you might start by gathering the evidence. What have you noticed that is giving you cause for concern? Is it a change in the person's behaviour, a lack of effort, tension between team members, or performance information that shows a decline in results? Whatever it is, you'll need this to credibly begin a conversation because it lets you have a solid observation that you can raise. The second thing to do is to let go of your frustration. Now, it's tempting in these cases to blame the team member for being lazy or uncommitted, and before starting the conversation, attempt to calm your emotions and keep an open mind. And the third thing you might do is to be prepared to hear things you don't like. Having these conversations can open you or the team up to criticism, but remember the team member is not really to blame. Their response may be quite natural from their perspective. And often I find in these sort of situations, the team member's behaviour is what you're observing, but there's some sort of root cause which is causing this issue. And as I said earlier, I don't think it's usually because they're malicious or they want to do a bad job or make your life difficult. And usually when things like this don't make sense, when I can't understand why a team member isn't behaving the way I think they should, it's because there's a missing factor. There's something I don't understand or know about, which would actually make a lot of sense if I did know about that thing. So therefore, that's why a conversation is so useful, to try to uncover the causes of some of the motivation challenges or the "it's not my job" statements. So in terms of starting the conversation itself, you might start by mentioning what you have observed, what you're noticing that is concerning you. And what we want to do here is also reduce the blaming language. So instead of blaming, you want to frame your concerns and take responsibility for them. So for example, I've noticed recently that you've pulled back from doing some work, whatever that work is, and I'm a little concerned because normally you're one of the ones who helps out. What do you think about this? So then sit and listen to what they have to say. And this is very different to saying something like, "You're not pulling your weight," or "You're not doing the work we need you to do," which sounds a little bit more blamey, and it can get people on the defensive. And then after you've sit and listened to what they have to say, you want to work with them to identify potential solutions that could help the situation. So we want to make it less about you and more about helping them. So rather than coming at it from a "woe is me, I'm the leader and you're making me look bad," it's more about going, "Hey, how can we help you get back to where you were before?" So I believe that in many cases, this "it's not my job" is simply a symptom of a problem and natural behaviour for a team member who feels they aren't getting what they deserve. Now, it's worth taking the time to consider their point of view and seeing if you can turn a "not my job" into a "well, I'm happy to help out." So I'm interested in your thoughts on this one. Have you come across this "it's not my job" mentality before? What did you do about it? Let me and all the Thoughtful Leaders know in the show notes page. There's a comments section there, thoughtfulleader.com/245. Leave your comments and let me know what your solutions are to this "it's not my job" problem. I'd love to read about them. Now, as I said earlier in the episode, this is the very last episode for 2023. I usually take about a month off podcasting and writing articles at the end of the year. And because, I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit tired because I've been doing podcasts every week and articles every week for the whole year. So I'm going to take a break. I'll be back in mid-January where the next episode will come out. But I do want to say thank you very much for listening to the podcast and subscribing if you are a subscriber. I really appreciate it because it helps me get the word out about Thoughtful Leader and thoughtful leadership in general. I hope you have an excellent end of the year period, whether it be a holiday or Christmas or whatever you celebrate. If you do not have the privilege of being able to take some time off, I also thank you because you're working while other people get to rest. So we appreciate that. Okay, thanks for listening. Keep up the thoughtful leadership as usual, and I'll be back next year.